Foundation. This is a terrible poster, by the way. Season 1 of the show has just finished its run on Apple TV+. It's an adaptation of a series of science fiction novels by Isaac Asimov, novels for a long time considered extremely difficult to adapt to screen, either in the form of a movie or a TV show. And the reason for that is Foundation is not really about individual people, but rather about societies on the scale of centuries and then even millennia. Essentially, the first book starts with Harry Seldon, a mathematician that figures out that this huge galactic empire, which has been going strong for thousands of years and is still prospering very well, will actually collapse in the next couple of decades because of a number of factors, both internal and external. And Seldon sets up the titular Foundation, which is meant to be an organization that will provide sort of a framework to allow human civilization to continue, to survive the fall and rebuild after it. And in the book, we kind of skip multiple years at a time, visiting the world of the story every few generations when a new crisis hits and seeing how the Foundation deals with it, handles that crisis, thanks to the plans laid out partly clearly, partly secretly by Seldon. So if you wanted to adapt this faithfully, it would need to be almost an anthology series, which every few episodes would just drop all the established characters completely and the setting and move on to the new point in the timeline. While interesting, it would certainly be difficult, I think, for the general audiences to engage with the story presented in that way, because typically what people look for in TV shows are characters and their development and story arcs over prolonged time. And this adaptation attempts to fix that problem by slowing down the story and actually focusing on individual people, individual characters, but unfortunately it is completely unsuccessful in that attempt. I think it ends up sacrificing a lot of the original intent of the story for characters which fall completely flat in the end. So you lose a lot, but you don't gain anything in return. So in the show there are essentially three storylines. One is about Gail Dornick, the apprentice of Harry Seldon, who helps him set up the Foundation, but before she manages to reach the colony world where they're supposed to live, she is ejected from the ship in a lifeboat and then stranded in space on an unknown other spaceship, trying to figure out what led to that, what's happening, what's she supposed to do next. The second storyline happens on Terminus, the colony world of the Foundation, and picks up 30 years after the prologue with Harry Seldon. It is focused on Salvor Hardin, the local, let's say, sheriff, as it were. The official title is warden. So she's the first generation person that was already born in the colony, and she has to kind of figure out a way to save the colony from the quickly developing first crisis involving an invasion by an underdeveloped nation from another planet. And the third storyline stays with the Empire, which is set up in a really interesting way, actually. The Emperor exists always in three people at a time. All three are genetic clones of the very first Emperor, and they're all at different age to provide perspective and rule most effectively. The head of them is the middle one, Brother Day, played by Lee Pace. The older one is Brother Dusk, and the younger Brother Dawn. And this goes on in cycles, but the one we're getting to watch, Empire begins to play with ideas of stagnation and potential changes in that which hasn't changed in millennia. And I have to say, the Empire stuff is the best part of the show, no question about it. Partly due to superior writing, partly due to really interesting philosophical ideas at the heart of this plotline, but also due to superb performances from Lee Pace. He is the best actor in the show, no contest. He elevates it to another level, just commands every scene with his presence. And put it like this, if we only got to see the Empire storyline, it would actually have been a very solid series. Unfortunately, we also spend a lot of time on Terminus and in space with Gale, and both these storylines are awful. The dialogue is poorly written, the actors are garbage, the, let's say, logistics of the plot, the choreography of action sequences, the whole conflict part, it's bafflingly bad. It almost feels like you're watching two different shows. The Empire plotline feels like a prestige drama, and the Terminus stuff like low-budget sci-fi from a local TV station. No joke, it is just terrible in every single way. Now, one thing I want to make perfectly clear, the show changes the gender of multiple characters from the book. Understandably so, because the novel was written in the 1950s, and every single named character in there was male back then. So in the show, Gale and Salvor, just to name the most obvious ones, are both played by black women. And the fact that these characters are totally garbage has nothing to do with their gender or race. It is quite simply the effect of poor writing and poor performances. So to say the Foundation is a disappointment would be an understatement, especially as the first two episodes were truly amazing and promised a lot, but the show quickly went downhill after that. It clearly has a big budget, and the special effects are top notch, and it's weird because the production value with the Empire stuff is really great, but then we get to Terminus, and it looks like cheap cosplayers again. So despite all the production value with the Empire and so on, I think that the basic core of the show just doesn't work, which is a shame because clearly the show will continue. From what I heard, Apple is planning 8 whole seasons, but I just don't know whether I'm interested enough to check anything beyond the first, because I think fixing the issues would require a fundamental rebuild of what the show even wants to be. If it still tries to be a character-driven drama instead of a philosophical and political exploration of entire societies on a massive scale, then even if they manage to improve the dialogue and the performances and the production value, it will still miss what was so great about the novels.